I frequently utilized to do work in a coffee shop around the corner. From where I lived, it was a little put but pleasant, and I might center superior there than at domestic. So I would go there at whatever point and bring my tablet, with as well as a few other work stuff. I would more often than not discover a pleasant spot within the corner or against the divider, and after that work for a few hours each time that I went there, I would too get a coffee or something, well, typically something that happened after I had been attending to the put for approximately 6 months or so. I keep in mind that I went there at night. The coffee shop was open lovely late. I do not keep in mind precisely how late, but I had been there for many hours, and I think I was the, as it were, individual interior, other than the representative. I wasn't truly paying the most prominent consideration to my surroundings, because I was centered on work at one point, in spite of the fact that apparently out of no place I got this airdrop ask on my tablet. I utilize an Apple MacBook, and on Apple gadgets, you'll airdrop things like pictures and stuff to other Apple gadgets. This was unusual, and I looked up from my screen after looking around the coffee shop. I couldn't tell who this might be from presently. I couldn't see the whole put from where I was, but I certainly didn't see anyone else. I had thought that it was purge, or at least almost empty interior out of interest, in spite of the fact that I'd chosen to acknowledge the airdrop. When I did, I saw that it was a photo. After clicking on it, the photo was an awfully frightening picture of a man's confront. He showed up to be in a, for the most part, dim room, and looking right at the camera, he was making an interesting confront, and I was wondering if whoever sent this to me was attempting to scare me. I looked around and tuned in. I didn't see or listen anybody, and the representative working did not appear just like the sort of individual to send irregular airdrops. I went back to my work on my laptop. Moving on from the unusual picture, I was exceptionally centered for the another 30 minutes or so. But the another time that I looked up, I taken note something. There was a man sitting at a table, almost 30 feet absent, and confronting me. It was the same man that was within the airdrop picture, and he was making a comparative frightening confront, the one in the photo. The man gazed at me in a way that made me need to run out of the building. I looked back at my computer screen and attempted to overlook him. But the more that I did, the more I seemed sense him fair gazing at me. I hadn't ever noticed this man here before. I figure it was conceivable that he could have been, but I certainly hadn't taken note. After a handful minutes, I couldn't center on my work any longer, so I decided to take off. I pressed up my stuff and tried not to see at the fellow, whereas doing so at that point, when I started to take off, I did see over at him. He was still gazing at me. I trusted that he wouldn't get up and take after me out or anything, and gratefully he didn't, so I cleared out the coffee shop and went domestic. I attempted my best to disregard almost the insane circumstance. A few days after this, I went to the coffee shop once more. It was another normal time of getting work done. I too went there a little bit afterward this time, and remained there into the night once more. I was getting a lot done and working on my tablet like normal. Well, this time, after being there for possibly an hour, I saw the man once more. I was sitting in a different spot this time than some time recently. The man was sitting at a table around the same remove absent from me as some time recently, in spite of the fact that I do not know when he got there, because I certainly hadn't seen him. When I arrived, he was gazing at me again. I was so creeped out that I fair got my things together right away, and after that walked out. I went back domestic, and since at that point I haven't gone back to that coffee shop. I still do not know who the guy was. He certainly appeared like a ad up to crawl, in spite of the fact that I'm fair happy that since at that point I haven't seen him. I utilized to work at a littler coffee shop. It was a pleasant small shop that was sort of within the city. I lived in a loft fair, a few squares absent, and it was as it were approximately a 10-minute walk, so I would regularly walk to and from work, which was exceptionally helpful. The coffee shop did not have that numerous workers numerous times, When it got a little bit afterward, within the day there would, as it would be, one of us working, so one night I was working until close. We closed at 9. 00 at night, and from 6. 0 p.m. on I was all by myself most of the time there would, as it would be many customers interior here, and there this one night, in specific with around an hour, cleared out there was just one person inside aside from me. A man sat by himself within the corner. He was not employing a laptop or anything, but just showed up to be sitting there. I didn't truly have much to do, and fair begun getting prepared to shut. The man remained there until almost 10 minutes. Sometime recently we closed then. He cleared out once we were formally closed for the night. I bolted up and did a few last things at that point. I cleared out the coffee shop and headed back domestic to my flat. The range that the coffee shop is in is sort of in the city. It's not in downtown with tons of tall buildings, but there are sidewalks and numerous other buildings and businesses adjacent at this hour, in spite of the fact that it was as a rule pretty quiet. So when I left and got onto the walkway, I saw this fellow kind of standing around like right exterior. It was the same fellow who had been sitting interior of the coffee shop. I turned to the right and was making my way domestic nearly as before. Long as I begun walking, though, the man behind me started strolling as well. I had an awful feeling about it. I cruel. He would have been standing around for at slightest 15 minutes, for the time that he left to when I closed at that point. When I leave, he begins strolling as well. It appeared exceptionally suspicious. But what may I do approximately it? I kept on walking home. At first the man was trailing me by a long separate. It was a calm night, so I might fare scarcely listen his strides behind me, but gradually he appeared to be getting closer, and I was actually attempting to walk faster too, so it wasn't anything that I was doing. The closer that the man appeared to urge to me, I became increasingly apprehensive. When I was maybe midway domestic, still strolling down the sidewalk, he was inside probably 20 feet of me. I was considering fair sprinting the rest of the way back. I truly didn't know what I was getting to do at this rate. The man would capture up with me long some time recently, making it to my loft building. I sort of looked around. When I noticed that to my cleared out and across the road there was a bar that appeared to be open. I all of a sudden took a hard left and crossed right within the center of the road. No cars were coming, and after crossing I saw the man following me did as well at that point. When I got over, I rapidly went interior of the bar. When I made it in, I was glad to see that there were a few other individuals around. A few were sitting at the bar, and some others were scattered around at tables and stuff. The man who had been trailing me did not enter. I looked to the window, and instep, the man appeared to kind of be hanging around exterior. I figured that he was holding up for me to leave again, and this was likely what he was doing at the coffee shop, holding up for me to take off. I looked around the bar. Then I taken note something. There was an exit sign within the back, meaning they had a raise exit. So I walked over to the back, and at that point left out an entryway that they had it driven into a back street, and I followed that until I have to be the street now I was on. A diverse road that was one square over. I fair trusted that I wouldn't see the fellow once more. I strolled rapidly and was able to create it back to my flat. Affirm I didn't see the fellow once more after that to this day. I'm not beyond any doubt why he taken after me. I cruel. I do not know who he was or anything. I do not work there any longer, but that's by distant the scariest thing that happened to me. When I utilized to claim a little littler coffee shop, and I would work there almost about each day to spare cash on workers. I would do as much as I may by myself. Of course, I did contract a few individuals, but I delighted in the work, and I knew how I needed things done well. One night, I was working alone. We were open until 8:00 p.m. each night, and it was drawing closer closing time. No one was interior of the shop at all. I stood behind the counter cleaning and organizing things. I decided to shut up shop and bolt the entryways. Fair sum of minutes. Sometime recently, 8, typically something that I regularly did. I cruel. We once in a while got any clients within the afterward half of the 7. 00 hour, a few would usually be there early within the hour, but after 7. 30 we perhaps get like one individual, and no one would ordinarily come inside the final 10 minutes. I too didn't want anybody coming in at like 759, and after that requesting a bunch of stuff or something like that. So I keep in mind that after locking the entryways I strolled over and went back to behind the counter. It was at that point that I listened some person attempting to open the entryway, which was bolted. I looked over to the entryway, but didn't have a really great see of it. I scarcely saw someone strolling absent, but couldn't see who it was, or anything so at that point. I begun to do a few more work of things that I would sometime recently being able to take off this would likely take me about 15 minutes. Well, possibly 5 minutes into this, I suddenly listened glass. Breaking it was coming from the front conclusion of the shop. As before, long as I listened it, I ducked down and went behind the counter. I didn't know what was going on, but I dreaded that it was a break-in, and minutes afterward, I listened the sound of some person entering the shop. It appeared to be true that someone had in fact broken in. I didn't need to remain behind the counter. I was scarcely out of locate of the front where the broken window was, so I crawled on the ground to the conclusion of the counter. There's a small passage within the back, which is where the lavatories were, as well as a capacity room. When I was at the end of the counter, I had to go quick to maintain a strategic distance from being seen, or at slightest try to. I rapidly made it to the lavatory, and after that closed the entryway behind me and bolted it. Fortunately, there was a full locking entryway that was beautiful, durable. I listened the sound of some person strolling interior the building and drawing nearer where the counter was. I still didn't have any thought as to who they were, in spite of the fact that fortunately I had my cell phone on me, and I took it out and hit 911. I told the police that some person had broken into my coffee shop. As this was happening, I listened strides moving around to behind the counter range. I did not listen anyone talking at all the strides before long moved to the corridor where the bathrooms were. They got closer and closer. At that point, they attempted opening the lavatory entryway, where I was. After attempting it, the strides moved back, and after that, I stopped hearing them altogether. I held up interior the lavatory for the following 5 minutes or so. At that point, the police arrived. When they got there, I came out to see no one else there aside from the cops. They looked the whole put, but whoever broke in was gone. Money register was robbed, and there was broken glass. Closed the window. Other than that, nothing else was out of. But the shop was closed for another couple of days. But we before long opened back up. I had the put for another year sometime recently, offering it. That was the scariest thing that happened when I had a coffee shop. This can be something bizarre that happened a handful of years back. I utilized to work within the city, and the building that I worked in was a number of stories tall. My office within the company that I worked for was on the 4th floor. So one night I was working exceptionally late. I would have due dates, and it was one of those days where I knew it would be a long one. I was still working difficult at likely 9 or 10 p.m. I would be done soon, but not, however, and I was getting extremely tired. There was this coffee shop that was continuously open and fair around the corner. I had the thought to go there and fast get a coffee to keep me up. Presently, by this time, there was, as it were, one other individual working in the building with me. It was my colleague Jason, and he was in his office with the entryway closed. I went over and inquired him in the event that he needed a few coffee, and I keep in mind he said no at that point. I cleared out. We had this staircase that would lead straight down to an back road. It was not the most entrance by any implies, but a faster one, so I went down there and cleared out. After walking through the back street, I would be on the sidewalk fair steps away from the coffee place. When I was within the back road, I keep in mind taking note a lady standing on the corner. I walked past her to the coffee shop. I went interior, and after that requested inside a minute. Likely I had gotten my coffee. and was strolling back. I went back to the back street and interior of my work building at that point. I went straight up the staircase to the 4th floor and back to my office. Upon getting interior, I opened my entryway in spite of the fact that, and the woman who I had seen within the back street was standing there. I was shocked to see her. She was looking right at me. The lady was brief, lean, and had dark brown hair. I asked her what she was doing here, and the lady did not say anything. She was not assumed to be there. No one was other than me and Jason. Truly, the lady at that point begun to charge at me. This was truly unforeseen, and I moved back and out of the way, not knowing what else to do. When I did, the lady at that point closed the door to my office and bolted it. I called out to her, asking who she was and what she was doing, but she did not reply me. I at that point went and got Jason. We chosen to call the police. Meanwhile, we attempted to get the woman to open the door, but she wouldn't. Eventually the cops got there, and they were at last able to induce her out. After a while, she had messed up my office, tearing several files and reports. But fortunately, she hadn't done any genuine harm. My computer was still intaglio, and I was able to finish my work for the night. The lady must have come to the entryway within the alleyway. Sometime recently it closed, or possibly, for a few reasons, the entryway didn't close all the way. It was supposed to automatically bolt when it closed. So I'd not truly beyond any doubt what happened. The entryway driven to the stairs, and truly each entryway that was off of the stairs, but for my office, was bolted. And that's how she finished up there. I figure, looking back, it still gives me the creeps. I used to work from domestic a few of a long time prior. Sometimes to be more productive, I would go to a neighborhood coffee shop. There was one that had a great ATM circle that I enjoyed, and might more often than not work beautiful well. There one morning I drove to the coffee shop, and after getting there went to a table within the corner. There were many other individuals there, but the place was not as well crowded. After I set up my things, I got a coffee, and after that begun working on my portable workstation. I would say almost an hour afterward, all of a sudden a man strolled up and sat at my table. This was truly strange, because there were bounty of other open seats situate, and I wasn't fair sitting at a few expansive table. There was fair one other situate over from mine. I was sort of irritated, but I didn't say anything. The man didn't say anything either. He fair sat down and begun looking around. I proceeded with my work, attempting not to pay the fellow much consideration, but at that point the fellow apparently begun to see at me. I anticipated him to possibly say something, but he didn't. It was truly peculiar. At that point I chosen to urge up and go to another table. I took my portable workstation and put it into my rucksack. At that point I stood up to walk absent, but as before, long as I stood, the man stood as well. At that point he at long last talked. The fellow inquired me where I was going. At that point I chosen to fair say that I was taking off, and said that I required to go domestic. The man at that point inquired me in the event that I might grant him a ride. I thought that this was truly unusual, and I said no to the fellow. I begun strolling absent from him and for the exit entryways, but as I did, the man begun to walk nearby of me. I cleared out the coffee shop and begun to walk through the stopping part to my car. Around midway through the stopping part, the man was still strolling, following to me. At that point I halted and turned to confront the man. At that point I inquired him to halt, taking after me. He did not say anything, but fair stood there looking at me. There was truly no other individuals around, which was as well terrible. Possibly in case some person had been strolling by, they would have seen the commotion and mediated, or something. I didn't know. In case I needed to go to my car presently, the man would likely attempt once more to induce me to grant him a ride. Possibly he would indeed attempt to halt me from getting in my car, inside and out. I considered going back interior the coffee shop for a minute, but at that point chosen not to. I chosen to fair go to my car and attempt to take off there rapidly. I turned and strolled amazingly quick from my vehicle. I might sense the man beginning to walk quick with me when I come to my car, I took up my keys to open it. It was at that point when abruptly the man come to out, and I felt him get my hand. It was the hand that I was holding my keys in. He attempted snatching the keys, and I attempted holding on. The result was that I dropped the keys, and they fell to the ground. I rapidly got down and picked them up, but the man attempted to do so as well. When I got the keys, he attempted snatching my arm once more, and there was a brief battle, but by one means or another, I was able to break absent lovely rapidly. It all happened so quick. I truly do not know precisely how I did, but I did, and after that I turned and ran back to the coffee shop. The guy chased after me for just like to begin with 10 feet, and after that he ceased. I got back within the shop, and after that called 911. The police came out right absent, but the man was long gone by the time they got there. The as it were thing that I might do was tell my story of what happened and allow a depiction of the fellow. The good news is that they had him on reconnaissance video when he was within the coffee shop. Indeed, in spite of the fact that it was grainy, it made a difference. A few of other individuals in the coffee shop were met as well, and the police finished up finding the man. I still do not know why he chose me, but I'm truly happy that I got absent from him.